Yeah, hi Paritosh.
Hello.
Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good.
Yeah, actually, yesterday night I couldn't solve your doubts, so I'll
Okay.
back to you on that after the webinar, okay?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I'll go through that exercise and I'll tell you what to do for that.
Yes.
Okay, great. I don't know if any other guy is going to join, but yeah, let's wait for 2 more minutes and then
Okay.
maybe start, okay?
Okay.
So yeah, initially I'll go through some good topics known as decorator, which
Okay.
will help you a lot and which is a good thing to learn about. And
Mm-hmm.
then later on, I'll have one more thing I'll tell you about the memory pointers and how lists work with the memory pointers. So that is also there in one of the content lesson in the nano degree. But yeah, I'll go through that again because that is a very good concept and I want
Mm-hmm.
you guys to know about it. So yeah, I'll go through that also, and then we'll just go through a brief intro about all the projects. So if as you haven't done much on the project and those things, you will be easily able to like it'll be better for you to just go through this content which I'll go through with you of the project, and then maybe later on after the webinar you have an idea of what we need to do in the project and how it will be reviewed and how to submit and those things like that. Okay?
Sure.
Yeah, great, great, great. So yeah, I'll maybe just I'll mute for the time being because there is some disturbance. Uh, According to you, the voice we are getting. So yeah, I'll just mute for the time being, but I think you guys can unmute it yourself whenever you have doubts. If you're not able to unmute, just ping me on chat. I'll unmute you for that. And yeah, so I think let's start with the webinar. Uh, I think till now it's just two of you, Ankur and Paritosh. So yeah, so maybe later on people will join, and if they don't join, then I think they'll see the webinar later on through YouTube itself. So it's fine. I'll be just starting now because it's already 10:50. So yeah, so you guys can unmute yourself, I think, and ask me your doubts. If you're not able to unmute, just ping me on chat on this Hangouts link only, and I'll see to it when I'll be asking you for doubts. I'll just go through some two concepts which are really important, like decorators, which I promised you guys, but I couldn't tell you the content for that. But I just went through it lately, and I'll just go through the decorator part and what decorators are. So that is also a very important concept, and we'll think on the examples on which decorators are used. So we'll go through that too, and then I'll be going through how to pass a list to another function and how memory pointers work. So that is also very, very important concept of learning and knowing, okay, how the list and dictionaries are working at the back end, and so behind the scenes how things are working when we pass lists to a function and other things like that. And then after that we'll just go through how to submit the project, how to work on the project, the overview of the project. I won't be going much through the code part because it's a project and I'm not supposed to help you through the project code, because that is the thing which we want you guys to do yourselves. Only then we'll be able to learn. But I'll just go through an overview of what project is and how you learn Python through the project and things like that. So yeah, so let's start. I'll just share my entire screen, and so yeah, I think you guys are able to see the screen, and I'll just go through the decorator part. So yeah, let's open PyCharm. Okay, so yeah, I have it here, and I'll just see the chat. If you are not able to unmute yourself, I'll see the chat when I'll be asking for doubts. So this is a very important concept known as decorators. Very important, and we should be very well versed with this concept. And so why do we use decorators? First, let's try to make an example of why do we use decorators. So okay, so let's first go through what are decorators and what is the syntax. Then we will be in a better stage to think on why do we use decorators and things like that. So yeah, so I'll just start with writing some normal function. I'll first write a normal function as def num of students. So I'll just first go through what decorators are, how do we work on decorators and things like that. And then we'll go through, okay, some very good example on when to use decorators and things like that. So yeah, so I'll just have a normal function known as number of students, and maybe I'll just print the number of students which we have in a Slack group, that is 26. And we are getting some error here, so this is related to some type annotation which I have made compulsory for PyCharm settings. So it's fine, there is nothing as error for this thing. But yeah, I've made it compulsory, the type annotation thing. So what do I mean by type annotation is, like if I can write it here as the number of students doesn't return any so it doesn't return anything. So I'll write the type annotation as none. So this is known as type annotation, and there are other type of annotations also. So suppose there's a variable name here as aipnd. Again, have to write a type annotation. Okay, aipnd is of type int. So this is also known as a type annotation, that I am telling the variable name aipnd, which is of this function. So number of students is a function. I have a variable name as aipnd, and the type of aipnd is int. So when we tell the type of a variable, or when we tell the type of a return type of the whole function, those are known as type annotations. As the name implies, it's we are telling the type of the variable name, which is aipnd, or we are telling the type of the return type of the whole function. Those are known as type annotations. So this is something which is there in Python. You can go through this. I won't be going through much over it, but this is very helpful for good industry level projects in which we have a lot of functions and a lot of variables coming up, and a lot of return types for all the functions. So this helps a lot the other developer who reads your code, that okay, I know aipnd should be an integer, I know the return type of number of students function should be none. So then at that point of time we have the help of these type annotations coming up. So yeah, so this is a small concept of type annotations. I'll just stop it, and I'll just come back to our normal question. So I'll be just calling this function, and let's try to run our program. I'll be just running the program, and we have the 26 on our screen, which is the answer for which is the answer for this calling of the function or this program. So suppose, okay, so suppose I want okay, I'll think of an example later on. But yeah, let's try to make the number of students as something dynamic. Whatever we'll pass to the function. So let's have as a num of students. I'll just have an argument here. I won't be writing type annotation, so I'll get this error. Okay, for the timing we can also write that. So I'll just write the type annotation as int, and I'll have number of students getting printed, and I'll have to pass some number. So as we know, it's 26 for our case. I'll just run this, and I get the answer as 26 again. So this is very basic example of calling a function. Okay, so let's suppose I want to call another function when I call number of students. So at that point of time, we have decorators. Okay, I'll go through this again. So let's have another function known as AIPND. So this is the name of our nano degree. It's basically AIPND is the name of nano degree, and I can pass a function to a function. Okay, I'll go through this again. So here, as you can see, I'm passing a number to a function which is named as number of students in the function, and then I'm printing the value of that. I can pass. So there is also concept of passing a function to a function. So suppose I have, so I write the variable name here as fnc, something like that. I'll be omitting the, I'll not be using the type annotations here. I'll just ignore these red lines which are coming because these are for type annotations. I'll just ignore that because the program will compile even without type annotations. So I'll just ignore that. So okay, so I can pass a function to a function. So AIPND is a function which is accepting a function as an argument. So this is very like good concept of learning. So I'll just okay, so I'll pass that function and I'll just call that function in the body of AIPND function. Okay, yeah, yeah. Is there any doubt? Okay, okay. Sriraj is also there. Hey, hi, Sriraj.
Hi.
Hey, hi. So
Hi.
yeah, so I'm just going through the webinar, and if you have any doubts, you'll be unable, so you'll be able to unmute yourself. For the time being, I'll just mute you. Okay,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
and then if you have any issues, anything, you can just uh, so you can just unmute yourself and you can ask your doubts. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, great to have you, Suraj, in the webinar. And there's some good important concepts I'm going through, like decorators and everything. I hope you'll enjoy it. And yeah, Ankur, I can see your doubt. I'll just get back to you after completing the decorators and the basic definition of it. And then you can ask me all your doubts, all your queries, so that I'll be also able to tell you what are the issues which I think you face or which we are not clear of. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, so as I'm going through the uh, decorator function again. So yeah, so as we know, we can have a function which accepts a function, and we can call that function internally in the code of AIPND. Okay, so I'll run the program, and I think we'll be comfortable in reading whole of this thing in some minutes. So yeah, so I'll pass a function which will be stored in FNC variable name, and I'll just call that function. And suppose, okay, so let's have the function without any argument for the time being. Let's omit this. Let's print maybe 26. Let's just print 26 here, and let's just pass this function to another function known as AIPND. Okay, I'm calling AIPND function. I'm passing the num of students function in it, and let's try to call this thing, and let's try to see what happens, and then I'll go through why it's happening the way it's happening. Okay, so we get the error, we get the answer as 26. So let's try to go through this. What I'm doing, I'm calling AIPND function, which is this. I'm passing another function to AIPND, which is getting stored in FNC, and I'm then just calling FNC function. So for this problem, so for this statement, what's happening? I'm the AIPND function is getting called. So AIPND called. What it's doing, the FNC variable is equal to num of students for our case. So this FNC variable, which is here, it's getting the function name as number of students, which is this function which we pass to AIPND function, and I'm just calling this. So the num of students, which is basically FNC function, it's getting called in the body of AIPND. So basically, for this call, FNC is getting getting FNC is equal to num of students function. So this thing is getting called here. So this line FNC calling of FNC is equivalent to calling number of students, because I have passed number of students as a function to this AIPND function. So yeah, till now any doubts? You can unmute yourself. You can ask your doubts. Till now anything? Any doubts from any of you? You didn't understand anything? Mm, okay, I think it's clear for all of you. Okay, Ankur, you can ask your doubts later. It's nothing to worry. But I hope others are clear till now. So I hope you are. Otherwise, you can always unmute yourself, I think. And if you have any problems in unmuting, you can ping me on chat. So yeah, so till now, what I'm basically doing is I'm calling AIPND function. I'm passing a function known as number of students, which will come here in FNC. So FNC will be equal to number of students for this call, and I'm just calling FNC, which ultimately calls number of students function, which ultimately prints 26 on the screen. Okay, so I'm making this a base for the decorators. So I'm just also trying to go through it slowly, and I'm telling the things again and again, but these are important. Okay, so yeah, let's try to make it a bit more maybe interesting or something. So yeah, let's try to return this function, and let's try to have a variable. Sorry, then let's try to have. Okay, so I'll just change this code according to decorators. So I'm, as you know, I'm making a base for the decorators part. So I'll just change this. I'll have one more function inside a function. So I can also initialize more functions inside a function itself. So I'll initialize a function known as something as AI. I'll just accept an argument into this function, and inside this I'll call FNC. Inside this I'll call FNC with that argument, whatever I'll get, and then I'll just return AI. I think I should return it this way. Yeah, I'll make the code back again to accepting an argument. So I'll just make it back to accepting an argument, and I'll print the argument. So I'll go through this also step by step. So nothing to worry if you're not able to understand till now. I'll go through step by step. You can always ask for doubts. So yeah, so let's just normally call number of students initially. I'll just pass 26 to it. Let's just try to print this. What happens? Nothing will happen. Number of students will be called. 26 will go as the value of NF students, and 26 should get printed. So I'll just run this normal program. Okay, so there's one more none which is getting printed. Why is this getting printed? I need to know this. Okay, I'm printing. Okay, so why did I print? Okay, so I'll go through why we get none. Okay, that is also a good concept which we just went through. I'll go through why none is also coming up on the screen. But okay, let's try to omit it, and we see 26 is getting printed. Okay, so yeah, so suppose because I'm calling number of students, it is calling this function, and if students is 26, I'm printing 26. So because of this call, 26 is getting printed on the screen, which is I think a normal thing. Suppose as I did initially, I printed this thing. So what was happening initially? This was getting called. Because of this call, 26 was getting printed, which we know. Then I again printed whatever the return value of num of students function was. So in this line, what I'm doing, first I'm calling the function, which is num of students 26. It is printing 26 on the screen. But then because this number of 26 call is wrapped inside another print statement, so what does that print? That prints the return value of this function. So num of students 26 just prints something and doesn't return anything, as we have the type annotation also to indicate that. So you can see the benefit of having type annotations. It tells us, okay, if it's returning something and if it is returning, what is the type of it. So as we have none here, so this function doesn't return anything. Because it's returning none, the none was getting printed, because print just ultimately prints the return type of this function, which is none. So that's why when we run this program, it's 26 is getting printed because of this call, and none is getting printed because of this whole line. So that's why we see 26 and none here. So yeah, this is also a good concept which we went through. So if it's returning something, then that return would be printed. So okay, so just in case, just to make things even more clear, I'll just remove this type annotation, because, or I'll make this as int, because it will be returning an int now, which is number of students. Let's try to run this again. So what will happen, this function call will print 26 and return the 26 to this function call. As 26 is getting returned here, 26 will again get printed because of this line. So because of return, I am getting the return value of this whole statement as 26, because of which the second 26 is coming up, which we can see. The first 26 is because of this line, because when we are calling the function, this first print line happens and 26 is getting printed. So this is the whole concept of how this we saw 226, or first initially 26 and none. So this is like how the concept of this printing and everything goes. So yeah, till now we just made a very normal call of just printing the number of students. So this is a very normal call. Now let's try to call AIPND function. So this is an important concept of decorators. I'll go through that. So let's try to call AIPND. As we know, it accepts a function. Let's try to pass num of students as a function. And let's try to pass 26 as a value for number of students function. So we are passing a function known as num of students in AIPND. So we can see FNC has num of students as its function. Will what does this return and everything goes? So I'll just go through that step by step. Be very concentrated on this, because you may have a lot of doubts, but one or twice when you'll go through this content, you will be able to understand. Okay, so yeah, so I'll just go through this. Okay, so how this happens, I'm calling the AIPND function. I'm passing another function known as number of students to this function. How this gets converted is, when I'm calling AIPND function with another function, what ultimately do we have? We get AI returned for this. So I'll just go through this like this. I have AIPND, I have num of students as a function which we pass to this AIPND. This thing gets converted to, so as we know, the return type for this type of call is AI, as you can see. So as I'm calling AIPND function, and I'm passing a function, it basically returns me something known as AI. And what is AI? It's a function. So I'll just write it here that I am getting AI as the return value. Okay. So ultimately, if I write AIPND and number of students, ultimately, just on a thinking perspective, you can think this whole line equivalent to AI. AI is basically one another function which we initialized in the body of AIPND function. What AI is ultimately, so ultimately what is AI? AI is basically calling FNC, which we pass to AIPND, which in our case is num of students. So I can write AI to be equivalent to calling a function that is FNC. What is FNC? FNC is whatever function we passed as an argument to AIPND. What is FNC in our case? It's number of students function. So I'm basically calling num of students. AI function is basically equivalent to calling FNC. FNC in our case is num of students. So basically, ultimately, for this whole call of AIPND num of students, I'm ultimately, this is equivalent to calling AI. What is AI equivalent to? AI is equivalent to calling num of students as a function, and whatever argument which we pass to this thing, that gets passed ultimately to num of students function, and we should get on the screen 26. So let's try to run this. I'll ask for your doubts. Nothing to worry if you didn't get it till now. So as you can see, we get 26 as the answer. How it's happening? AIPND and passing a function to it is ultimately AIPND num of students call is ultimately equivalent to AI, because I am returning AI in this function. If you see this function, I'm ultimately returning AI at the end. Okay, so calling AIPND num of students is equivalent to calling AI. What is AI equivalent to? AI inside its body, as you can see, is calling FNC. So it's basically FNC in our case, because we gave the variable FNC as number of students function. So FNC is equivalent to number of students function, and thus AI is equivalent to calling FNC. FNC in our case is number of students. So we are ultimately, with this call, what we are doing, we are calling num of students function. And what we are passing as an argument, that is 26, it goes to X, which is basically a placeholder for the argument of AI function. And that X is again getting passed to FNC, which in our case is number of students. So ultimately, with this call of AIPND number of students 26, ultimately with this call, what is ultimately getting called? It's number of students function with 26 as the argument, and that is getting printed. That's why we see on the screen 26. So this whole call is just basically ultimately calling number of students with 26 as the argument and printing the 26 value on the screen. So yeah, so I think that's a lot of knowledge and a lot of things. But still, any doubts, Paritosh or Ankur? Till now, anything? So you want me to go through it again? I'll go through it again. Is anything which you have, which you want to ask? Okay, Paritosh. Is everything clear, Paritosh? Okay, that's great. That's great. If you are able to understand this concept, that's amazing. That's pretty good. So if you guys have any doubt, you can always stop me. Very good. If you are able to understand this, this is very important. Okay, so let's come back to the decorator part. So AIPND, this function, we term this type of function something as a decorator itself. So this function, we can call this function as a decorator, and we can decorate. So what decorator means? We can decorate other functions using a decorator. So why it's named decorator, which means we can decorate or we can wrap another functions with a decorator. So what do I mean by this? I can decorate function known as num of students with a decorator, which in our case is AIPND. Okay, so I can decorate number of students function with a decorator which is known as AIPND in our case. So why we are terming that as decorator is, okay, I'll just comment this line. I'll come back to this line again. What do I mean by decorator is, suppose I call number of students with an argument with a value of n of students variable value as 26. Suppose I call number of students function here. What ultimately happens inside the computer is, because I have decorated, so I'll just write it here, because I have decorated uh, uh, because I have decorated num of students function with with AIPND decorator. Because I am decorating this function num of students with a decorator known as AIPND, because I have decorated num of students function with AIPND decorator, this statement, which statement I am talking about? This statement of calling number of students with a variable value as 26. This statement is, okay, I'll come to the next line, is equivalent. So it's basically equivalent to calling AIPND num of students. Okay, so I'll go through this again. Because I have decorated number of students function, which is this function, with a decorator AIPND. If I'll just call this number of students function This number of student function doesn't just call this function directly. Because I've decorated it with some other function, this call first gets converted to this type of call. So ultimately, I should write it as this type of call. So if I write number of students 26, it's getting converted to AIPND wrapped on number of students 26 call. So basically, if I'm calling a function and if it's decorated with some other function known as AIPND here, we'll wrap this call with that decorator. So basically, I'm wrapping the call. Basically, I'm wrapping the call of the function with another function which is AIPND, which is the decorator. So this call is ultimately equivalent to AIPND num of students of 26. And what this call is equivalent to, as you can see, we just wrote this initially. So what this call is equivalent to, I'll just write this again, this string again here. So I'll just write the roadmap of how decorators work at this line. So initially, yeah, any doubts? So I can see someone unmuted. Okay, I don't think there are any doubts. I'll go back to the screen later. So I'll just write this again. So this is very important concept. So if because I have decorated number of students function with another function AIPND, so a normal call of num students 26 gets converted into AIPND. That is the decorator gets wrapped over the function call which I am making. And this, as we know, is equivalent to AIPND num of students, which is the same. And because this is equivalent to AI, as we went through this before, which is equivalent to number of students. So ultimately, this call gets converted to AIPND. This call gets wrapped over AIPND, which ultimately is equivalent to AI calling AI function, which ultimately is equivalent to calling num of students function. So this call will again print 26 for us. So I'll just make it a bit clear and I'll just run this. So as you can see, the decorators in practice. So initially, as you can see, without decorators, we had to write something like this. So suppose I'm commenting this. So without decorators, we have to call something like this, AIPND wrapped over num of students. But if we have decorators, it will ultimately wrap whatever function call we have for this function. It will automatically wrap it over AIPND. As you can see, this statement, as you can see, this statement is ultimately equal to AIPND num of students because we have a decorator which wraps itself over the function call, which is ultimately equal to calling AI, which is ultimately equal to calling FNC, which in our case is number of students. So ultimately, number of students 26 is getting called, and we get the answer as 26. So yeah, so I know there's a lot of overwhelming of knowledge coming up and those things like that. So for the time being, any doubts still now? This was a very important concept, so I wanted this to be there in this video. So yeah, so any doubts? Great to see Alfred joining the call. Welcome, Alfred. Any doubts till now? Also, Alfred, I'll be coming back to your doubts after the webinar. So please be with me for that time, till that time, and I'll ask for all the doubts which you have through Slack. So yeah, any doubts in decorators till now? You can unmute yourself and ask me, or ping me on chat. Is there any doubts? Alfred or Sriraj who joined us in between, I would suggest you to guys to go through the decorators part through the YouTube live video, which I'll share the link after this webinar. Just go through that. That is very important concept. So yeah, for the timing, you should be with me for the next concepts. But yeah, later on, you should go to the YouTube live link, which I'll share after the webinar, and you should go through the concept of decorator later. So yeah, till now, any doubts? If you have anything, just unmute. Mm, okay, I don't think you have any. So I'll be moving to the next concept, and then we'll just go through a small overview of the project. Okay, so I'll go through the next concept then. Feel free to unmute yourself whenever you have doubts. I'll just comment the decorator thing. Okay, this didn't get commented. Okay. So yeah, so list and memory points. Good concept. Very important concept. relating to memory and those things. So in one of the content videos in the nano degree, I saw this very important concept which we have in the nano degrees content. I'll go through this again. Okay, so let's have a function again. Let's have a list of fruits. So I'll write the function name as, okay, what do I need to know? Okay, manipulating. Okay, list. Okay, manipulating fruit list. Yeah, this works. So I'll pass fruits into this, and then I'll try to manipulate fruits. So I'll be accepting fruits as a variable name, which will be of type list. I'll be manipulating with the fruits list. What I'll try to do, I'll just okay, I'll go tell you one more good concept which I think I know. So I'll just append a value of apples into this. And this line, we can also write something as dot append using fruits plus equal to apples. So I think this line also does the same thing as the first line. So the code written on line 24 is equivalent to the code written on line 23. So I think this is also one of the concepts, one of the way of appending an element to a list. Okay, so I'll just append that, and what else should I do? I can write something as fruits dot pop. Let's see what happens. And any other manipulation which I know which I can do with the list. Okay, I can extend the list. So yeah, that also I can do. So I'll just also write that fruits dot extend, and then I'll just have oranges because I got bored with apples now. So I'll just extend oranges to it. Okay, I think the syntax is correct, but otherwise we'll get an error and we'll see through the syntax. So nothing to worry. If there are any problems, I don't know till now. So I'll just initialize the fruits list. So I want it to be a bit clear. So I shouldn't pass the list and initialize it inside calling the function. I'll just initialize it prior to calling the function. I'll just have the fruits list as watermelon, and that's it. So I'll just have one element. I'll just pass this to the function manipulating fruit list. Okay, so yeah, so let's see. Okay, uh, okay, so yeah, let's try to call this. Let's see what happens. The things will work, but I think we should print it somewhere so that we know what all happened with the list. I'll just print fruits at the end of this function. And let's so what I'm basically doing, I'm initializing fruits as a list. I'm passing that to a function known as manipulating fruit list. I'm appending something to that list. I'm popping something from the list, extending it, and then printing the value of that list. So yeah, so let's try to run this program. Okay, amazing. So what we see, we can see it initially appended apples to it. Awesome. It again appended one more value known as apples. Then it popped the last. So pop basically just removes the last element from the list. So that is basically it removed the second apple which we added through this line. So it removed that. Then we again added oranges. So ultimately our list becomes as watermelon, apples, and oranges. Okay, great. So I should have it as watermelons. So because everything else is S. So okay, let's ignore this. So yeah, so I have the list as watermelons, apples, and oranges. Okay, awesome. So yeah, let's go through the memory thing and the pointers and how these things work. Very important concept. Okay, so yeah, the question comes here. Yeah, can you tell me what is the value of fruits here? Okay, any guesses from any one of you? Just unmute yourself. Just tell me. What will be the value of fruits if I'm just printing the value of fruits outside the function? Like I'm printing it inside, I know. But suppose this is a print. Okay, I'll just also write this as one of the things. Uh, okay, just give me a minute. I'll just come back. Just give me a minute, guys. Yeah, so any any updates on the value? If anyone can just try, what should be the value of this print statement which I've written here? Anyone who can unmute himself and just tell me the value for that? Mm, okay, I'll just tell you the value, but yeah, I wanted someone to try at least. Anyone who wants to tell me the value of fruits outside the function? Would it be just watermelons or watermelons, apples, oranges? Okay, okay, I'll tell you the answer then. So, what is the value of fruits in this case? It's ultimately, is it just watermelons because I'm printing it outside the function, or is it watermelons, apples, and oranges? So let's see what is the result. So as we can see, the both values are true. So what ultimately happens is when we pass the fruits as a variable inside. So I'll just write the name here as passed fruits. So I'll just make the name as this so that we can understand on some things a bit better. Also, if you have went through the content, I'm just repeating the same things again. But this is a very important concept, so I just wanted to go through the pointer part. So that's why I told you this way. So yeah, so I'm passing the fruits list inside the function as passed fruits. So what ultimately happens when I do this? So what's happening here? I'll just write that on 2 3 lines. So yeah, so what happens is the passed fruits variable points to the same list stored in fruits variable. So whatever list is there in fruits variable, which is watermelons, initialized with watermelons. So when I pass that fruits list to, so when I call a function and pass that fruit list, the passed fruits variable just points to the same list which I passed. So passed fruits list, like the variable, just points to the same list which is there in the fruits variable. Okay, so this is the same list. When I append something to passed fruits list, it is ultimately getting append to fruits list also, because these both variables, passed fruits and fruits, are pointing out to the same list. Then I again append something, it gets appended in this original list only. Then I pop something, I extend some things, and then I try to print. It's getting the changes are getting the, like the changes are occurring in the same list which I initialized. So it's these, because even if I am trying to do the changes using passed fruits variable name, but as we know, passed fruits variable is pointing to the same list initialized in fruits. So this is the only one list which is there in the whole program which is getting manipulated. So that's why when I print fruits list also here, it is not coming as watermelons, it's coming as watermelons, apples, and oranges, because this is the only list which is getting the changes in this function. Even if the name of the list got changed, but it's pointing out to the same list, and the changes are the changes are getting executed in the same list itself, and I'm changing the fruits list only. That's why when I'm printing the fruits list, it is coming as watermelons, apples, and oranges. Otherwise, it will come as just watermelons. If passed fruits was supposed to be a different list than the original list. So that's why, that's when pointers come, and how pointers work. So basically, this is pointing to the same list. So the pointer of this variable is pointing to the same list, the list which is initialized in the case of fruits. The same list is getting its changes inside the function, and then I'm printing that list only. So I can also try to return it. I can also try to return passed fruits list. So it is basically the same list as fruits. So I can just write it as fruits here. So I don't think even if I write, okay, I'm trying to return it. So yeah, maybe I can also like store it in fruits and then try to print and some of the things which we can do differently with the same question, but the answer still remains the same. So yeah, so this is a concept of pointers and how passing a list doesn't change the list or doesn't make a copy of that list to a new list which is named as passed fruits. It is the same list which is getting passed and the same list is getting its changes through the function. And then I am able to return it and then I'm able to print it too. So yeah, till now, any doubts? If you have any doubts, anything unclear, you can ask me your doubts. You can unmute yourself. I'll just wait for 30 more seconds for any doubts. Okay. Okay, awesome. If you don't have any, great. I think you are able to understand how pointers are coming into place and how decorators are working. So decorators also I went through some very simple example on decorators. It can get more complex. You can understand about decorators more through the net. I won't be going through much over it now. And the pointers concept which I wanted to go through. So these two concepts are very important. Now I'll just go through some overview of the project. So as you all know, the project will be reviewed by a mentor, not me, but some other estimator who are very good in reviewing students' code and telling you with all the improvements which you need to do in the project. So this is the first project in which you learn about Python and the very good important concepts of Python. So how to submit the project when you'll go to the last project workspace. Okay, I'll just open that. Taking me some time. So yeah, so this is the workspace, and as you can see, there's a submit project button at the end. So after completing all the files, doing changing in all the files, classifier or some classify images or check images and all those code when you'll do like try to have these check images as the main check images is the main file and those things. Yeah, whenever you complete the project, you can just go to this button on the right bottom and you can just click on submit project to submit it and it will be getting reviewed by some other mentor and not me, and you'll get the review in some a day or I think in 8 hours, and if there are any improvements required from your side, you need to do the improvements and you need to again submit. So as you know, you can resubmit it as many times as we want before the hard deadline, which is basically the end of the nano degree. So we can submit the project and so this is a basic workspace which you'll have. So after every concept, so as I would suggest every one of you to go through the content first, then only work on the project, because the timing code, so suppose there's a content known as timing code, so this content tells you how to use time, how to get the start time, how to get the end time, how to understand on how to how for how many seconds the program is running, how to think on that. So these there are sample codes given in every content. So we have the content here first, then we go to the project. Okay, now I have told you the content, now please write your code here. Then again, as you can see, we'll go to command line arguments. This whole content goes. So there's a very good content in the nano degree which tells you that okay, how do we add arguments? How do we do things with Python? How do we have the argument passer? How do we add it? How many arguments do we need? What the argument first is telling you? Like in this case, it's saying, okay, the name of the argument is underscore underscore. Sorry, hyphen hyphen dir. The type of the argument is string. The default value is pet images. The help part comes when suppose you need help on what arguments does the program accepts. So the help will tell you, okay, there's an argument known as dir, which is the path to the folder of pet images. So this also, so whatever is required for the arguments or whatever is required for the project, the content has gone through that first and then asks you to code it in the project workspace. So it's very important to go through this content. So I'm telling you, okay, how to pass the argument. So okay, I initialize the arguments, I added something, But how do I parse it? How do I get the dir argument in my code? So suppose I'm writing Python check images, I'll write under hyphen dir, and I'll write the value as pet images. So what happens through this line? Python knows, okay, there will be an argument coming up when I'll call call this file. There will be an argument known as dir. Whatever the value of that will be there, which is in our case, as we have supplied pet images. So as you can see, when I'm calling this, when I'm trying to run the file, I'm passing argument hyphen dir. I'm passing the value as pet images. So what does this code do? It sees the argument as dir. It tries to parse that argument using parser.parseargs. So in args, we have all the values, and we can assess the dir value using in args.dir. So through this, we can assess the value of directory argument. So suppose I need to add an argument known as architecture. I'll just write this type of line. I'll write the name as hyphen architecture, then type, then default. What I need to have the default if a person doesn't supply me or doesn't write something like this here. What should be the default value of dir argument? And I'll try to assess that argument, I'll get the default value as the value here. And this way, the content just gives you the brief idea on how to work with command line arguments. And then we ask you, okay, now as we have told you how to do it, just write the code here. So we also tell you the file in which you need to do the changes. So if I'll go through this, I'm telling you, okay, to do one, what code to edit. So I'll tell you the specific functions to edit. What is the expected outcome? What do I expect when you complete this code? And then how do we check your code if your code is correct or not? Then we tell this. Then what is the purpose? How do we use it? How do we use it in the code? How to assess the pass arguments? How to call the arguments? How to supply the arguments? So we go through, the content goes through everything on how to use it, when to use it, in which code to use it, so that it's very easy for you to navigate through the code and see on what all do we need to fill in the code. So yeah, so command line arguments in there. Then mutable data types, the concept I went through today. So you can just go through this video, very good video. So you can just go through this. So I'll just go through some normal overview, and then maybe I'll ask for your doubts. So initially we'll be writing timing code. So this basically tells you if the start time. So this basically needs to know that how much time it took our program to run. So the timing code, the motivation behind having the timing code is we just need to know for how much time our whole program will run. Then we have the workspace. Then we have command line arguments. So in this, we want you to add three arguments, known as first as directory, then which is the CNN model, and then the file name of the dog names which we have. So these three arguments you need to add. So just go through this content. So as I said, for the project, I am not supposed to tell you the code and maybe go through much through the code, because the project is on which we assess you. So I'll just give you an overview of all the things, and I want you guys to figure it out and maybe ask whichever doubts you have. Then there's creating pet image labels. So basically, through the file names, we need to make a dictionary, and we need to tell the file name as the key of the dictionary and a list in which we have the label of the pet images. So again, as I suggested, the content is very good here also. So it tells you how to deal with the file names, how to get the file names through a folder, how to run over those, and how to think on creating the dictionary, and how what all functions do we have for a string, and then how to make a pet name label from a pet image file name like this, how to end up with a pet name label at the end. So this goes through all the things. So I suggest all of you to just go through the content once, then only go to the project. Otherwise it will be very tough doing the project. So yeah, this is very important. Go through all the quizzes and then go through this content, and then only just jump onto the project, so that you understand how to do things and for this particular task or to do. So when we have the pet image labels, then we'll try to classify images. So in this, as we all know, in the first project, we don't go through the AI part. So we have just uh, trained a classifier, and you just need to call that classifier, and just get the classified label name from that. So in this, we won't be training any classifier. That will come in the next project. But for the timing, we'll be using Python to just call that classifier, get the classifier label, and then work out with the classifier label. So this will basically be over that, and you'll have to add whatever the classifier label is into the value of a key, which is a file name. So just go through this content. It will tell you what to do. So I'll just go through the overview that is in this. We call the classifier. We get the classifier label through the classifier, and we don't train the classifier. We have already trained classifier. We just call it and get the label name, and then we try to match it with some other label name which we think should be the answer. And then we have, okay, if the label which classifier is saying is dog, or is it indicating a dog or not a dog, so things like that. And we'll be comparing our image label and the classifier labels. Then so this is basically comparing and getting the classifier label and some normal if else things or some comparing things. So this will go through that, and we have, so even like you can see the content is so good that we tell you, okay, at the end of this to do, this should be the structure of the dictionary, results dictionary. The key should be file name, the value should be index 0, pet image label, classifier label, did it match, is it a dog image, not a dog image, or things like that. So we have all these things to make you understand, okay, what should be the structure at the end of to do of this particular task. And then we go to the next problem, like calculating results. So this is basically some divisions, some percentage calculation, some stats which we have, which so that you have an idea, okay, stats plays an important role in artificial intelligence, and how do we compute some different statistics, and how do we show the ourselves, okay, this is the behavior of our classifier. Is our classifier good enough? Do we need to train it again even better after this because the stats are not good, or the stats are well enough, we have a good percentage of correct results, then we don't need to train our model further, it's completely fine, our model is working fine. So these stats help us a lot in analyzing the situation, what are the results from our machine learning model, do we need to train it even better the next time and with more data, or is our classifier good enough? And those stats are coming up here. So these will be just some normal divisions, some normal percent calculation. So calculating results would be that. Printing results is normal printing whatever results which we got on the screen, so that we can cross check if our results are fine. Because as so yeah, so here also, as you can see, how do we pass the arguments? Directories, pet images, architecture is a second argument which has a value resnet, then dog file is the third argument which has a value dog names.txt. So this is how we pass the arguments when we call our program. So we are calling checkimages.py. We are passing three arguments: directory, architecture, and dog file. And then we are saying, okay, try different architectures. Try ResNet first, which is our trained model, then LXNet the next time, and VGG, and then try to compare your results. So we are telling you, so this content tells you everything on what you need to do for this particular problem. Then we classify our own uploaded images. So we can also upload our own images. So we can upload a dog image, then a normal animal image, and then some image not of an animal, and then try to see how our results are coming up. Did we do well in our code? So do our results indicate, okay, the first is a dog image, the second is some animal image but not a dog, the third is maybe image of something or something like that. So does our code tell us those things according to our own uploaded images? So that will tell us the power of AI. So even with some new images which we are uploading dynamically, at a point still our code is able to tell us, okay, this image is of a dog, this image is not of a dog, the third image is of something, and so things like that. So uh, so according to dynamically, even if I upload images, the program is able to classify if it's a dog or some other dog breed or things like that. So that is the power of AI, because of the data on which we trained the model, which we didn't do in this project but which we'll ultimately do in the next project. We trained the model on our own data, and it was the trained model was able to tell us on some new images for which it was not even trained, But for new images, it was able to classify them as dogs or not dogs. So that is the main power of AI to which we want to reach after this project. So it's very, very important to complete this project and go further, in which we'll actually see the power of AI through Python, work with AI with using Python. So that's a very important concept. And then we have some final results which we through which we need to cross check. And I think Xenon raised a question. Some value here is also not correct, I think, for ResNet. So there could be one of the percent is not correct written here. So that could be the case, but nothing to worry if it is the case. Still, you just submit your project through this project workspace, and the mentor will see itself, okay, if the values match, or they'll review it correctly for you. So yeah, as you can see, there's a submit project button at this right bottom through which you'll submit the project. So just go through the content of every sub problem in the project one by one. Just go through the content first, like go through classify image, then only go to the code part, then go to calculate results, then only go to the code part. The same way as the lessons are there, in the order the lessons are there, just go through that order only, and then only it'll be very easy to complete the project. And then at the end, there are just some uh, rubrics, and so how to submit and things like that. So just go through that and just submit your project. So yeah, so this is the overview of the project and things related to it. So yeah, I think that's it for the webinar. Any doubts which you have? Just you guys can ask me. Any doubts? Just unmute yourself, ask your doubts. Otherwise, I'll be just finishing up the webinar here, and we'll think on the doubts on Slack group, and you can always ping me. So any doubts till now? So this was, yeah, yeah, Ankur. Any doubt?
Yeah, actually, I don't have. I'm going to the fourth lesson right now.
Okay,
So
okay.
once I go through all the lessons, then if I have a doubt, I will ping you on Slack. But as of now, I don't have any doubts.
Okay, okay, okay. No problem, Ankur. And yeah, as we can see, we can go through the content of the project and then go to the project or the quizzes.
Yeah,
That way, we'll be easily able to complete it, and you can always ask your doubts.
yeah,
So
yeah.
great. So for today, decorators and lists, pointers, those things are clear.
No, no, the decorators and pointers also are not clear. But
Okay,
first, what
okay,
I'll do is I'll go through this content,
okay,
everything,
okay.
and
Great,
then if I
great,
have a doubt, then I'll
great,
ping you.
great, great. Awesome, awesome. So yeah, so just go through this decorator thing also again. Just go through the YouTube link which I'll share,
Yeah.
and so you will. So it takes everyone some time, because decorators is a good concept and sometimes confusing. So it takes a lot of time sometimes. But yeah, ultimately you will be able to follow through, and things would be
Okay.
better. Okay, great, great. So I'll be just finishing up the webinar here, and I'll just
Okay.
share the link, YouTube link. Just go through that whenever you feel like. Okay. 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 Great. Great. So yeah, great, Paritosh and Ankur. Thanks a lot for joining most of my webinars. So thanks a lot, because of that I'm able to give the webinars, and we enjoyed it together. So I'll just share the YouTube link also so that others can go and go through the content, and let's meet soon or talk soon. Okay then. Bye. Thank you. Bye.